Welcome to another quiet journey through time as you settle into rest, perhaps, lying beneath soft blankets or listening with heavy eyelids in the stillness of night. Allow the world around you to fade into the distance. Together, let us travel far across seas and centuries to a world of silken robes, bamboo screens, and whispered footsteps along lacquered floors. A world where the distant clack of Getty sandals mingled with the soft rustle of paper doors. A place ruled not only by samurai and shoguns, but by quiet glances, refined gestures, and the delicate web of courtly intrigue. Tonight we step into the hushed corridors of a secluded residence in Feudal Japan to explore the life of a woman few would envy, yet many would misunderstand, the imperial concubine. And from there we shall wander further to distant palaces, to buried secrets, and to the lofty lives of those who ruled while others obeyed. So now, with breath steady and mind open, allow the gentle rhythm of history to lull you toward sleep. Let us begin. Imagine yourself waking in a room barely touched by the morning light. Thin slivers of sun filter through a paper shoshi screen, casting pale squares of gold across tatame mats. The air is still quiet. Perhaps the scent of incense, fragrant and earthy, lingers faintly in the air, reminding you of prayers whispered the night before. You are not a wife but a concubine. Your role is delicate, not lowly yet not honored in the same way as a noble consort. You live within the harem quarters of a daimyo or shogun's household, in a state enclosed by wooden walls and layers of silence. Outside, the world thrums with the clang of swords and the cries of fishmongers, but here it is stillness that reigns. Your mornings begin not with freedom, but with ritual. A servant arrives silently bearing a basin of cool water and a folded cloth. You cleanse your face with care. Then you dress layer by layer, wrapping yourself in a soft under kimono, then another more decorative robe above it. The colors are muted, chosen to reflect the season and the mood of the household. You do not choose them. You are chosen. Your hair is carefully dressed, not flamboyant, but refined, waxed, and shaped with pins that glint in the light. Cosmetics are applied sparingly. Pale powder dusted over your skin, a faint tint to your lips. Your beauty is not meant to dazzle, but to suggest serenity, and then you wait. The rhythm of your life is one of waiting for notice, waiting for approval, waiting for the rare summons that may or may not come from the master of the house. And while you wait, you engage in the arts of stillness. Calligraphy, painted fans, the folding of paper into tiny cranes, poetry recited beneath your breath. You are trained to move slowly, to speak in a tone barely above the rustling of wind through pine needles. Occasionally you may join other concubines or ladies in waiting in the garden. Here, among carefully raked gravel paths and swaying irises, you trade quiet words, half conversations held in metaphor and suggestion. Friendships are gentle and often short-lived, for rivalry stirs just beneath the surface. And yet you smile, because your smile may be watched. Sometimes a favored concubine becomes something more. She may gain influence, gifts a child, but more often you remain simply present. Meals are simple. Small dishes of pickled plums, steamed rice, perhaps a sliver of grilled fish served in silence. The sound of your chopsticks placing food into your mouth may be the only noise you make for an hour at night. You may be summoned or you may not. If you are summoned, you go with your head bowed. You walk behind a servant who bears a lantern. Your wooden sandals tap softly along the path as moths swirl in the orange glow. If not, you sleep alone beneath soft quilts, dreaming perhaps of an earlier time before the silks and the silence. And thus the day ends as it began, not with fanfare but with formality, not with excitement, but with the quiet surrender to a life lived behind walls. This was a day in the life of a concubine in feudal Japan, a world both gilded and confined, a rhythm of beauty and burden, delicately balanced beneath the shadow of power. Now let us walk gently forward into the quieter chambers of Japanese political history. Among the many women who lived behind the painted screens and silken curtains of Edo Castle, there was one who did not remain quietly in the shadows. Her name was Kasuga no Tsubone, but in time she would become known more simply and reverently as Lady Kasuga. Born in 1579, in a period still shaped by civil unrest and consolidation of power, she began her life not as a noble woman nor as the wife of a great lord, but as the daughter of a samurai retainer. Her early years were spent not in splendor, but in service, yet she listened closely, observed, remembered, and slowly she began to climb. Lady Kasuga entered the inner court of Tokugawa Hidetada, the second shogun of the Tokugawa dynasty, not as a wife but as a concubine. In this role she bore him a son, Tokugawa Iemitsu, who would one day become the third shogun. It is tempting to think of her role ending there, but it did not. She remained near him, patiently, quietly, and when her son took the reins of power, she stepped not back but forward. While others might have faded into the fabric of court life, Lady Kasuga grew into her title as Kasuga no Tsubone, a term that suggests both her role and her reverence. She became not simply a mother but a political advisor, a guardian of the shogunal heir, and the founding matron of what would become the inner palace bureaucracy known as the Ōoku. Imagine her walking the long, polished corridors of Edo Castle, her presence announced not by noise, but by the silence that followed in her wake, her voice calm, her words few, yet her influence unmistakable. Lady Kasuga created a world within a world. The Ōoku, or the Great Interior, became the women's quarters of the shogunate. It was more than a residence, it was a system, a quiet political machine hidden behind lattice screens and etiquette, and she was its architect. Within its walls, hundreds of women lived and served concubines, attendants, noblewomen. No man except the shogun himself was permitted beyond its gates, and it was Lady Kasuga who oversaw it all, with precision, with discipline, with care. Her relationship with her son, the shogun, remained close but formal. She was never flamboyant in court, never defiant in public. Yet her word shaped the appointments, the alliances, and the daily rhythm of power inside Edo Castle. She trained the women under her with the same stern serenity that had guided her own rise. Rituals were observed, manners upheld, letters written in elegant hand. Even the arrangement of flowers had meaning. And beyond her role as administrator, Lady Kasuga also served as a quiet diplomat. When foreign envoys arrived in the shogun's court, it was often her influence unseen, but felt that shaped the tone of receptions. She encouraged the arts. She advised on the conduct of high-ranking samurai families. Her home, though within the walls of the castle, became a point of pilgrimage for those seeking favor or clarity. She died in 1643, not on a battlefield, not in scandal, but in old age and with honor, a rare thing. After her death, the system she created, the Ōoku, continued, and though the women who followed her may not have known her name, they followed her rules. Her legacy was etched not in monuments, but in the daily customs of life behind the screens. In this way, Lady Kasuga exemplifies a truth often lost in louder histories, that power does not always come with a sword. Sometimes it comes in silence, in patience, in the quiet redirection of lives and loyalties, and in the long, unbroken gaze of a woman who knows her place and how to step just beyond it. Now let us pass through a different kind of doorway. From the living memory of a woman like Lady Kasuga into the quiet dust of forgotten archives, where letters sit folded fragile beneath silk cords and time-worn creases. This is the story of the hidden letters of the Ōoku, for centuries the women's quarters of Edo Castle, secluded, ceremonial, and heavily guarded, were thought to be places of beauty, obedience, and silence. Rarely did a whisper escape its walls. Rarely was a voice heard beyond its painted panels, but in recent decades, scholars uncovered a subtle clue. In a small family archive outside Kyoto, researchers stumbled upon a lacquered box stored beneath temple eaves, untouched for generations. Inside were letters written in delicate looping script, some addressed simply to her ladyship, others unsigned, most sealed with wax once pressed by slender hands. They were personal, thoughtful, full of daily detail, but more than that, they hinted at something unexpected. A hidden network, a quiet communication between women inside the Ōoku and those beyond. Imagine for a moment the life of a woman enclosed within Edo Castle, days marked by quiet routine, bound to formality, surrounded by ceremony, and yet within that life a desire to reach out, to connect, to remember the world beyond the gates. The letters spoke of small things, of the way the plum trees bloomed at spring of a new embroidery pattern learned by firelight, of sorrow for a lost sister. But between the lines was something deeper. One letter, dated to the late 1700s, spoke of the burden of being watched. Another mentioned the quiet codes we use and how she speaks to me through the colors she wears. Scholars now believe the women of the Ōoku developed a subtle language of their own, a code of expression, through fan movements, through floral arrangements, even through the layering of silk robes. Each hue, each gesture, each poem copied in a ledger meant something, said something. It was not rebellion, it was remembrance. Through this coded world they preserved a sense of identity, of community, of quiet defiance against the isolation imposed upon them. And through their letters delivered, it seems, by sympathetic monks, merchants, and midwives, they remained connected to the world outside. Some even wrote of dreams, of hearing the sea, of touching the bark of an old tree, of walking barefoot in a temple garden at dawn. One poignant letter, unsigned, ends with the words, "Tell no one I write, but write to me still. I will listen beneath the noise of the bells." The authors of these letters remain anonymous, their identities lost in the folds of time, but their words are a whisper from the past, soft, fleeting, yet human. They remind us that behind every silent chamber, every rule-bound courtyard, was someone thinking, feeling, waiting, someone who once pressed ink to paper and hoped their voice would carry. The letters of the Ōoku may never be fully decoded. They were not meant for historians, they were meant for someone who understood the pauses, the spacing, the silences. But even in partial fragments, they reveal something tender, that even in the most confined spaces, the heart finds ways to speak. Now let us drift upward from the enclosed chambers of the Ōoku to the high verandas and plum-blossom courtyards of noble residences in Kyoto. Here, the lives of elite women unfolded in layers of elegance, just as structured, just as restrained, but gilded rather than hidden. Imagine the soft whisper of Suriashi sliding steps on polished wooden floors, A noble woman, perhaps the daughter of a daimyo or high-ranking courtier, begins her morning with quiet ritual. Her attendants dress her not only for beauty, but for symbolism. Each layer of her juni hito, the 12-layer robe, is carefully chosen to reflect the season, her family's status, her mood, the outermost. Kimono may shimmer with embroidered cranes. Beneath it a lining of spring green, then white, then soft plum, a palette of poetry, worn as fabric, heavy, but flowing, restrictive yet admired. She does not dress herself. That, like many things in her day, is done for her. Her life is full and yet strangely empty. Time is passed in refinement. Brushwork, poetry, flower arranging. Composing letters written on hand-made washi paper, perfumed before being sealed. She may read the tale of Genji, its characters, mirroring her own life, a life of longing, restraint, and courtly performance. Meals are elegant, served with care. Small dishes in lacquered trays. A petal, placed just so on a rice mound. Conversation with other noblewomen is delicate and symbolic. Less about information, more about tone, rhythm, and phrasing. But the life of a noblewoman is not one of ease alone. Her marriage, like many, was arranged for alliance, not affection. She may not know her husband well. He visits sometimes, other times not. Children are raised by attendants. Her presence is formal, her role ceremonial. She is expected to embody virtue, grace in motion, silence in thought, presence without disruption. Beyond the walls of her estate, the world changes. Wars are fought, merchants grow rich, commoners bustle in the city. But within her world, the seasons mark time more than politics. She writes of snow falling on plum trees, of the sound of rain on a tiled roof, of a crane's call across a misty lake. And yet, beneath the layers of silk and the verses of poetry, there is perhaps a kind of stillness that borders on loneliness. She does not labor, she does not starve, but she also does not choose. Her education is limited by tradition, her mobility confined by expectations. The very beauty of her surroundings becomes a form of enclosure. A noblewoman might never see the streets of Edo, might never speak to a commoner, might never walk alone. She is revered, protected, hidden, not unlike the concubine. The contrast between their lives, one of secluded service, the other of elite performance, is not as wide as it may seem. Both women moved in circles of ritual and expectation. Both lived behind walls. Both existed in systems where presence meant more than voice, but the rhythm of their days differed in tone. Where the concubine waited, the noblewoman was displayed. Where the concubine hoped for notice, the noblewoman was expected to be seen yet not speak. And so as you imagine these women, one in brocade, one in simpler robes, passing one another in a corridor of memory, consider how status shaped not just their fates, but their very sense of self. Soft footfalls, the sound of wind through paper screens, the silent exchange of glances across a courtyard. That was their world, not built of battlefields or declarations, but of gestures, silences, and the slow movement of seasons. And now our quiet journey through the folds of feudal Japan comes to rest. From the private rhythm of a concubine's day to the poised influence of Lady Kasuga, from secret letters passed in silence to the elegant stillness of noble women drifting through palace halls, we have wandered through worlds, shaped by structure, grace, and quiet endurance. You may notice that beneath all these lives, no matter their rank or robe, there beats the same steady pulse, the rhythm of waiting, the discipline of form, the quiet negotiations of identity within a world that asked for presence, not voice. In feudal Japan, so much was communicated in silence. A glance across a garden, the arrangement of plum blossoms, the folding of a letter. These were the languages women used when words were not theirs to speak freely. And while time has moved on and the gates of Edo Castle are long since opened to the sky, the traces remain in museum cases, in translated scrolls, in the hushed pages of academic journals, and tonight in the gentle weaving of this story into your dreams. As you lie there, perhaps with eyes half closed, know that these stories now belong to you, not as burdens, but as soft shadows, echoes. The Concubine Folding Paper Cranes by Candlelight. Lady Kasuga, watching from behind her screen. A girl in another time writing poems no one may ever read. They did not seek to be remembered loudly, only to endure with dignity, with grace. So now let us fold up this story like a silken kimono at day's end, and place it gently aside. The world around you is quiet, the past is still, and sleep, like the falling cherry blossoms of a long-forgotten spring, drifts softly into view. Good night, and thank you for dreaming history with us.